Minasan konnichiwa, watashi no channel e yokoso. In today's video, I'm going to be going over some of the ways in which going forward I'm going to be studying kanji and vocabulary in Japanese to help me better remember vocabulary in Japanese, because currently in the last 2 years I've been studying Japanese, albeit on and off, and certainly not being all that serious with it. I have struggled to remember vocabulary, kanji, being able to structure sentences, and literally everything in the language thus far. So I just wanted to go over a couple of ways in which I'm going to be changing my language learning attitude and my style towards Japanese in order to help me hopefully learn kanji and vocabulary going forward. I am essentially a beginner when it comes to Japanese. I know basics when it comes to grammar, I know basics when it comes to being able to understand and read kanji. I can understand about 300 kanji, I would say, at a push. I also know the basics when it comes to just knowing other bits of vocabulary. I know some, but I certainly could learn a lot more as well. For that reason, I've decided to really boil it down to the basics, and I've decided to not overdo things and just to do what I've never done before in language learning, which is going to be picking a random word in Japanese and then having that word as my word of the day. The word in which for that day I'm dedicated to learning that word. I'm dedicated to learning how to say it, how to read it in terms of what the kanji looks like, and getting familiar with how the kanji is written out, possibly even the etymology of the word, and anything else that helps me to remember that word, how it's said, and how it's written. This may not seem like a lot, but if you commit to fully knowing a word every single day for a week, that's 7 new words that you should be fairly comfortable with. Obviously, if you do it long enough, consistently over time, there's going to be a lot of words you can start to really be comfortable with knowing. And this isn't to say that it's the only thing I'm going to be doing in my studies, but in terms of trying to just improve my vocabulary set, it's certainly something I'm going to be doing like kind of like there alongside my studies. So I'm still going to be attempting to do other bits in Japanese when it comes to studying. For example, reading on Link or translating sentences on ChatGPT, or whatever I decide to do in Japanese I'll still do. But just as like a little extra, there's going to be this overarching word of the day, which is going to be my chosen word of that day. So I've only been doing this for a few days, so obviously it's still quite early, and it's something that I've never done before in any of my other languages, to like commit a day to each word, as it were. So I don't really know how these results are going to go over a long period of time, but the idea should stick. I've seen other people talk about this method on YouTube as well, and they say that it's a really good way to like cement a lot of words into your memory over a long period of time. And it kind of makes sense. You're doing a long period of time and a little bit each day, which is literally what consistency is, as opposed to ramming everything into like a short amount of space, because then you're going to forget a lot of things. So I've only been doing this for 2 days so far, and the 2 words so far that I've been studying and I've committed to memory is muzukashi and kantan. With knowing a word like muzukashi, I was there immediately in my head like, okay, I can make something of this from the Japanese that I know. So I said, Nihongo wa muzukashi desu. I was like, oh wait, that's actually like a sentence. Like it's an easy sentence, obviously, but it's a sentence, and when you can make a sentence in another language that you're studying, it just makes it so much more like enjoyable, so much more real for you. And I also then was like, oh, surely I can make one of easy, and I'll go along the same lines of Nihongo wa kantan de wa arimasen. And I was like, okay, Nihongo wa kantan de wa arimasen. Yeah, cool, that's a sentence that I know. And then I went into ChatGPT and I just confirmed. I wrote it out in Japanese and I said, tell me these sentences if they need correcting, or tell me if they're correct. And according to ChatGPT, those 2 sentences were grammatically correct. And so along with this word of the day, obviously I'm putting words then into sentences, whether I can create a sentence myself or whether I need to ask ChatGPT, for example, to give me an example sentence. I'm looking at these words in sentences to then help me try and understand how they work with other words in a sentence. And so that's what I'm doing with this word of the day thing as well. And it's all just part of trying to give yourself enough exposure to that word over the day, and then next day you choose a new word. But then, like today, my word is kangeru. Is it kangeru? Kangeru, it is. My word is kangeru for today. Yet I will still go, Okay, so muzikashi, kantan, kangeru. Okay, cool. And I just give myself that little bit more exposure to saying the word, maybe even looking at the kanji again, whatever I need to do in order to help me remember those particular words. Because ultimately, words like muzikashi and kantan and kangeru are quite common words, and so these are important words which I didn't know previously, and hopefully I will now remember these words because I'm constantly saying them out loud, especially in this video, but even outside the video I'm repeating them a lot as well to myself, and also just in other forms of media and whatever that I'm consuming or that I'm outputting. For example, if I'm writing, I may use them again in sentences. So it's all about just getting the exposure to the words you're trying to remember, and also just being committed to remembering those words. And that's hopefully what I'm going to be doing for quite some time, until hopefully I do have a really good vocabulary set in Japanese, because it's been the hardest language for me so far that I've studied in terms of remembering anything like vocabulary or even how things are written, for good reason. Like, it's a difficult language. So at a certain point, I'm going to start building up my vocabulary set, and I'm going to get to a point where I'm going to have a lot of words at my disposal. It's happened to me in my Spanish, and it's happened to me to a degree in my Polish as well, at least to a better degree than my Japanese is currently. So at a certain point, I'm going to have a decent amount of Japanese words that I can just pluck out of thin air and be like, oh yeah, I know this word and I know that word. And actually, because I know, an adjective and a verb and a noun, I can start making sentences, and I can start understanding words, because obviously when I'm doing my word of the day, I'm also looking at the kanji as well and trying to understand that. So during the word of the day stage, as long as I can remember anything at all with any part of the word, then that's progress, right? So if I can remember, for example, muzikashi is one step towards like remembering that word. The other part is actually remembering the actual kanji itself, like how it's written. If you look at the kanji as a whole, will you be able to recognize it? Will you know how to say it? Because for those of you who don't know, kanji in Japanese, not only are they really difficult for the most part, but they also have like multiple readings. They don't just have like one pronunciation. Some may have 6 or 7 or 8 different pronunciations, or maybe even more. And so with the first part, when I'm learning words of the day, I will likely only know either pronunciation or how the word looks. All of this will start helping me in being more comfortable with reading. So the next thing is that I will get into reading more solidly in Japanese. I do read currently on Link, but obviously it's such a struggle for me to try and read on Link, in all honesty. Trying to read in a different script is like just a huge, I guess, disadvantage, but I don't want to make it like it's a disadvantage. It's something that I need to learn to do better, and it will come in time, of course, but once I've got like a decent amount of vocabulary, I can move on into reading, and once I can read in Japanese, I can start to pick up on the gaps of knowledge. And so essentially, if I look at a word, I'm like, oh, that's difficult, but I can't remember how to pronounce difficult in Japanese, but I know that this is the kanji for difficult because I just recognize the way it's written. I can look it up and it will say muzikashi. And I'm like, ah, yes, muzikashi. And then I kind of cement the idea of linking that sound with that image, or at least that character. And it works vice versa as well. I may look at something and I may be like, I've never seen this kanji before. Get the pronunciation, and then it will say kantan, and I'm like, oh, I know this word. I know kantan. I just forgot what it looked like in writing, and so then I start to be like, okay, so I can connect something that I already know quite well, which is the pronunciation, to something that I don't know quite well, which is the look of the word, the way that the kanji looks, the way that it's written. And so you can start to connect these dots, and after a certain while, which is probably quite a long time realistically, but after a lot of reading and stuff, you start to connect the missing gaps. So for me, in the first stages with the word of the day stage, it won't be too important for me to try and learn both pronunciation and the look of the kanji. Obviously, if I can, that'd be great. But in the reading part, when I'm getting more serious with my reading, that will become a lot more easier to pick up, because I've already got like a grasp for how things are said, or a grasp for what the kanji looks like, all being well, for the majority of the words I will pick for the word of the day. Obviously, reading in general is just a really good way to learn languages anyway. That's why I will be reading all throughout this process, because I just enjoy it. I'll do it in small bits or in big bits, just depends what I feel like on the day. When I get to that point, I will stop doing necessarily like word of the day, and instead I'll just be like, let's just read and try and get as much as we can done with reading. Alongside this step, of course, I'll be doing a lot of listening as well. I think listening just all throughout, to be honest, but especially when I'm reading a lot, if you can read and listen at the same time, really helps you to understand which words go with which pronunciation. And you know, especially when you got different scripts like Japanese, that will become really useful as I progress with my knowledge of Japanese. I just wanted to touch upon writing. I actually enjoy writing in my other languages. I don't do it all that much because it takes a lot of time. It's quite time consuming, but I do enjoy it. And so sometimes if I'm like exhausted and I don't want to read, I don't want to listen, I don't want to, you know, do anything else in my languages, I just want to take a break, writing can be quite a cool little thing to change it up, because I don't do it all that often. And also I see like a lot of science behind the idea that if you write down things that you learn them better. I'm not sure if it's true, but again, it kind of makes sense to me, because that's kind of what you do in schools and stuff. That's kind of how you learn your first language. But I don't do enough writing to know that firsthand, to be honest. I just write for the fun of it. Especially when it comes to Japanese, I'll just start writing the kanji out or the sentences out, and I'll try and write things that are of use to me or interesting. But in general, I just like the idea or the feeling or like something about writing in Japanese, especially. Maybe it's the end result when I look at my like page that I've written and I know that I've spent like 4 hours on a page just writing kanji on this page. Not writing kanji like the same kanji over and over, but writing like whole sentences. And because obviously they contain a lot of kanji, and because there's a lot of detail, it takes a long time, especially for a noob like me to write all these characters. I really have to like do a stroke, look over, do another stroke, and it takes a long time. But I like the slow progress of writing out all these complex characters and just slowly getting there. Like, writing, I think, is useful in language learning. Unfortunately, it's kind of redundant nowadays, to be honest. I don't want to particularly know how to write kanji in the particular order, because that's a whole thing in itself as well, where every single character in Japanese essentially has its own way of writing the kanji, and it's wrong if you do it in the wrong order. You have to write it in the particular order, in the stroke order that you have them. I don't know, that just feels like it's too much work. But also, not only that, like, you never really write in the real world anyway, quite often, especially in a second or third language or whatever. Like, it's going to be way less than your native language. I don't write personally a lot, but I do with my language studies because I find it fun. I think there is something there to be had when it comes to remembering what you're trying to learn. I just like to look back on notes as well, and I think it's just a lot more engaging than just typing on a keyboard. These are just a few points that I wanted to highlight, because these are things I feel like people do a lot, especially when learning Japanese and when learning kanji in general. So, flashcards. I annoyingly paid £30 to buy Anki, one of the most popular flashcarding apps, and I bought it like a month ago to see how it would go. It was as boring as I expected it. I may do a video on it, I'm not sure yet. I'm happy to like be proven wrong, because I would like to make that money that I spent on it sort of worth it, but I just find Anki really basic. It really shouldn't have cost anything. I know it uses SRS systems and everything, but so does every other flashcarding app that I know, and all that aside, I find that flashcards just do not help all that much. Obviously, it's more exposure, so it's not completely redundant. I'm not going to be that like cynical over it. I just think the time spent on flashcards could be time spent way better in other source of materials, for example reading, watching TV, you know, that kind of thing. I know a lot of people really enjoy, like, you know, using flashcard apps and stuff, and it's just a personal preference. Overall, I just find flashcards redundant. They don't really work all that well for me personally. I have used flashcard apps like Memrise before, and some other apps as well that I've used. So I don't know why I kind of paid the money for Anki. I just wanted to see what all the fuss was about, because I've seen a lot of YouTube videos about Anki and how good Anki is, and you know, how the results are so good and everything. And I thought I'll put my money into it and I'll make a video on it. And I haven't made a video on it yet, but maybe I will going forward. Something else that people do, particularly with kanji, is get a piece of paper and a pen, and they say, I want to learn this particular kanji to the point of where I'm like perfect with this kanji. And so they write the kanji out and they go, ooh, I could do this 100 more times. And they just write that same kanji out hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times on that piece of paper, maybe, you know, multiple bits of paper, I don't know. But the idea is that you just rinse and repeat, write the same kanji over and over. And when you have thousands and thousands and thousands of kanji, this is not an effective way of learning them, and nor is it an effective way to learn words in any language. I tried this in school and I could not remember any words I'd then done for it the next day when it came to tests. It just never worked, and I just genuinely think it's a waste of time. I was told that this is apparently how Japanese kids do learn kanji in schools, which kind of goes against my point a little bit, but also Japanese kids are surrounded by the language daily and it's the only thing that they're speaking, and so kind of still takes them 9 years or 10 years or however long to get to that good level anyway of being able to write them and whatever. But that's also while being surrounded by the language constantly. I feel like it's not a good way to learn a language as a foreigner, and rather than writing out the exact same kanji over and over and over again, the only times I will be writing kanjis is when I'm doing it in sentence form. For example, I'm wanting to write a sentence about my day, or something else that I'm maybe wanting to commit to memory, like a decent sentence, like Konnichiwa, watashi no channel e yokoso. There's something important for myself like that. I will write out the sentence, or if I'm just finding it fun, I'll write out sentences like a diary of my day. What I will not do is write the exact same kanji over and over again in a repetitive format, because that will then kill any enjoyment I will have in Japanese. And when the enjoyment goes, the motivation goes. It's as simple as that. The last thing I will not be doing will be stressing at any point. I don't really stress all that often anyway, in general. But especially when it comes to like when I'm learning things, I'm learning anything at all in languages, like, you know, grammar, vocabulary, kanji, whatever. I'm not going to be stressing over anything at all. People, I think, stress over this kind of thing too much, and they stress, oh, I knew this word last week, I was able to recall it in a sentence, now I can't, and I'm getting really stressed out because I just can't remember it, and I'm going to have to look it up again, and oh, what if in conversation I can't remember a word, and it's really embarrassing, and I guess there's all these different thoughts that race through your head, and like, just have fun with it. If you forget a word, it's because maybe you needed to know that word better. Sometimes there are very basic words in Spanish that I forget, and I'm just like, oh, well, that's because I haven't revisited these basic words for quite some time, and I need to revisit them again. If you don't come across things enough, then you'll kind of forget them. That's all for this video. I hope that it wasn't too long, and I hope that it kind of made sense. I tried to make notes to make the video a bit more cohesive. So I'll see how this video goes, and then maybe I'll make more notes for future videos, because normally I go off the top of my head, but maybe that's not the best way to do these videos. I'm trying to just try different things at the moment to like make these videos more engaging, everything from smiling more to just like editing differently and whatnot. So yeah, we'll see how that goes anyway. But regardless of all that, I hope this video has helped you out. Please let me know in the comment section below what you personally do if you're studying Japanese to learn kanji or vocabulary. If you're studying other languages, let me know what you do for those languages as well. It doesn't really change per language per se, but obviously when it comes to something like kanji in Japanese, there's a real focus on trying to learn how to say the kanji, how to write them, and everything else. So let me know down in the comment section below. And with all that out of the way, thank you guys so much for watching. I will catch all of you in the next one. Yoi ichinichi wo sugoi shite kudasai. Ja mata!